All right, everyone. I have another interview coming up. This is with my friend Chuckie, who I've actually met in person. Him and his friend Todd drove down and met me. How was that, by the way? Let me
That
put you on
was
the
fun.
spot.
That
Okay.
was fun. We really enjoyed the trip out there, man. It was a good time.
All right. Well, that sounds good because I was not expecting that to be the case. I thought Todd just wanted to hang out, and then I was like, "Oh wow, he's gonna ask me questions." It's like almost like kind of, this is business at this point. So he caught me off guard, and so I was like, "Okay." And to me, he was a clear, obviously INTP, which was odd that he even was confused about that. But no, I enjoy meeting people. I don't think if he thinks I'm shy when it comes to interactions with others. Uh, yeah, and so we're gonna have a conversation. Chuckie is an ISFP, which most in MBTI circles or Jungian psychology circles or sociology circles, they always type you guys as the musicians, and which I find funny because I've met obviously other ISFPs that are not that way at all. But you yourself are a musician, correct?
Yep.
All right.
Yeah.
And have you ever watched like the Frank James videos and where he does like the 16 types in different circumstances?
Every now and then, but he's so mistyped that I'm like, I don't want to watch him. I don't think until he can get himself correct, I don't really watch him very often.
No, I'm with you on that, and that bothers me too because he's a clear-cut INFP, and the fact that you have 168,000 subscribers and you're mistyping on yourself, which is funny to me. But I don't know the Dave Superpower's system. That's what I've heard is what he falls under, and so there are a lot of systems out there that are kind of confusing people. Well, anyways, if I might critique him, I think he is funny. I do like some of his stuff, and but if I might critique him, one thing is it's always ISFP always pulls up the guitar and starts singing to the girl, and it's always that, and it's just like let's add poetry in there, so because I know a lot of ISFPs are really good poets. I know a lot of ISFP teachers, things like that, and so. As an ISFP, how did you get involved in Jungian depth psychology?
It was a long, long journey of 4 years ago. I had no clue what my personality type was. Because I'm in a band or whatever, I can be pretty extroverted at times to get things done. And the singer of my band thought I was an E-type, and I wasn't really sure at the time because I didn't understand what introvert or extrovert was. And I thought I was maybe an ENFP, which I'm totally wrong on that. And I scored INFJ and like a moron. I'm like, oh, I'm INFJ. And then I'm like, nah, not really. And I thought I was INFP for a long time, but it turns out everybody and their sister on the forums kept telling me I was ISFP, and I finally read the description, and I'm like, I guess that really is me.
Yeah. Wait, are you trying to imply that some people get mistyped as INFJ?
Everybody and their sister.
Everyone and their sister. Yeah, and that's what the problem with online tests are, and to me in that case, and which is fun because with you, it's just like, and I've made these notions in the Facebook groups and things like that. There's definitely a lack of concrete people in the community itself. Um, how do you feel about that when you're? Do you feel like there's any kind of, I don't want to say discrimination, but there's I see it. Maybe it's just because the FE child gets sensitive about what people imply, but
I don't know if I see the discrimination, but some of the conversations go so in depth into a lot of this theory to where, yeah, it's cool, but I don't understand a lot of these long posts everybody's posting. I'm like, what are they talking about? I'm just like, interesting, but I'm just going to skim through this because they get above my head sometimes.
yeah. Yeah, I can feel that way too when people start talking about, I'm not going to say the word emotion, but there's definitely some levels of depth that I'm kind of ignorant on and can't really pinpoint necessarily, especially when we're talking FI. And so when I see like my Facebook feed just like flooded with all this FI notions of I feel this way about this subject or I feel like this, and to me, obviously evil is subjective, and I don't even necessarily believe in it. and from my world travels, I've learned that morals change drastically, depending on what part of the map you're on. And this includes just in the United States. I've lived in 8 states, and each state has its own different culture. And now I'm in Texas, which you are too, and that's a whole different issue. And then you have your part of Texas and my part of Texas, and then other parts of Texas too. And so, to me, I just think it's something that's so subjective that I have to just dismiss it all the time. And that's my problem with that. All right. So and so then you just decided your ISFP from is it then what?
Well, it took me a long time to really accept it because I was so skeptical of it. But because I didn't really know what my type was, I thought, because like I said, I scored INFJ. That wasn't right. I got INFP a lot. That wasn't right. I knew I was some kind of FI person. There was a time for like 5 minutes I thought I was an ENFP, but I'm totally not that, and I totally don't even have NE or SI or movement even in me. So I was in a forum called Crystal Star Castle. There were a bunch of NFs, and they invited me to the thing. And one day they all just told me I was an ISFP, and then I'm like, "Are you sure?" I think I'm an intuitive. They're like, "No, you're concrete. You're a sensor." And they sent me all these things to read. And there was a guy on YouTube that followed my channel that said I was an ISFP too. So it was just like everybody was coming at me with the pitchforks that I was an ISFP, and I was just like having a hard time believing them. But
Okay.
After a while, I was like, okay, I guess this really is me. I was like, one day I'm finally like, well, I guess it does make sense. It was a lot to digest, but it is what it is.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense though. I mean, let me ask you some questions since you are a musician. Did you ever find learning music hard?
No, it's one of the easier things, unless I'm just playing something way out of my skill level, like from a
Yeah.
genre I've never done. But no, that's one of the things that I actually can do quite well, and I've got perfect pitch and all that good stuff.
Yeah. And so, I mean, my brother, who I was talking beforehand, debating whether ENFJ or ISTP, which is funny when you're typing family members, it could be very confusing because you've seen all lights of them. But probably ISTP. And I watched him. I don't know if you actually got lessons with the guitar or you just self-taught yourself.
Mostly self-taught, not very many lessons.
Correct. And so he was the same way. It was kind of like my mom went to a garage sale and brought a piano home, and he just was playing around with it, no lessons whatsoever. And within like a week, he was able to play it, and so it's just kind of like, well, play, basic piano, and actually be able to follow the pitch and all that other stuff. That's something I can't do. When I started playing bass guitar, for instance, as an ENTP, that's my lowest skill. I could read a book and follow the systems in the book and learn to play it. And playing bass guitar is great because it's an assistant anyways, and so that's great for ENTPs, play bass if you're really into music as an ENTP, because you're not really leading as a bass. I mean, maybe in jazz, you can argue are, certain punk rock maybe, but for the most part, you're going to be following and you're going to be assisting, lead guitar for that matter. And so what was, if I might put you on the spot with the past again, so I remember we were talking in the restaurant, you brought up growing up in school. What was it like going through school as an ISFP?
People think you're slow and awkward because you don't say much. And they're like, why does this guy not say much? And they think, I don't know, it's hard to explain. They think you're slow, retarded, or just weird or creepy. But then when they find out you play guitar, they're like, oh, he's kind of cool because he plays guitar.
Yeah.
And when I did talk, I'd only talk about music. So it was like, I don't know, like they just didn't really know how to connect, I guess, because that's all I cared about was art and music. I cared about, like, my favorite guitar player was Yngwie Malmsteen at the time. He shredded so fast, and if you talk to me, that's the only thing I really wanted to talk about was how fast of a guitar player he was.
Yeah.
I didn't like small talk, and I never really talked a whole lot. But when I did, it just felt awkward, and they said I sounded monotone and told me to say "how" and "peace pipe."
Okay, they thought you were Indian.
Yeah, because I'm just that monotone when I speak or whatever. And then that was high school. In middle school and the years before, I really didn't say much of anything. I was even quieter and just kind of didn't talk like at all. I'd maybe say one or two words a day in class, and that's about it.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting about ISFPs, although it's one of the more common types, but they're always pretty prevalent in school, and you can pretty point them out pretty quickly. Were you ever into art itself, like drawing and painting and clay and stuff?
When I was a kid, I tried to make my own cartoons, but I wasn't that great at it. What I did get into though was theater arts around middle school.
Okay. No, I
So I
love
guess
theater class. I love the drama class myself, which is also an ENTP thing. Um, yeah, when I think of as a teacher, and I have ISFP students, obviously, and I think they're funny, and and every once in a while, it's always like I can always see like the gears working in their head because of the control, and so they're trying to process it, and they're also learning English at that, and they speak Chinese, and so it's always I always make sure to give them a time to respond. And one of my longest, which is hard for me because I'm movement, I want to keep going. And but when I have one of my longest regular students is an ISFP, and he's super funny when it comes to different things like that. And I don't know. It's why we watch their little gears working. They're trying to assimilate all the information, and then they're either respond, I don't know, after 5 minutes of thinking. I'm just like, okay. And I think it's so cute to me. And because, ENTPs can be pretty guilty of saying stuff without thinking first, even though, we're high TI. But it's kind of like, oh, you have to say something quick, otherwise, the silence is going to cause some problems. And so that's always something funny to me. And we were talking about music before I pressed record. And when I was in a band, I'm now typing the majority of my people. We had 3 ESFPs and 1 ESTP in the band, and so I never really dealt with SE parent. And so if it was somebody to be critical about sound, it was me because of SE demon, and not to the point where I was going to notice tone differences and say, hey, you're doing that wrong. That wasn't what I was doing. It was just more or less my own presentation on what I wanted to do. And so we were talking about, pessimistic SE. And to me, it was like, I didn't want synthesizers on my voice. I didn't want synthesizers on different things. I didn't want a digital sound, and I hated that, And so when I hear things like auto tuners and things like that, now as a person, I'm thinking that's more optimistic SE. Everyone's doing this, they've had success, so let's do that route. So how has SE parent demonstrated that in your musical adventures?
I'm very picky about stuff, basically. Hard to explain. I will admit I'm recording a solo album, and the guy doing it is using Melodyne on our singers, mainly just because they don't have all the time to record like I'd want them to. But I always tell them don't rush, take as much time as you want. But I'm very, very picky, and sometimes I'll get forced into situations where I just have to let stuff live, even if I don't want to let it live. Or when I'm recording a guitar solo, I'll record it over and over and over, and I'll still hate the final result. I'll be like, the performance is terrible. But I guess we can't spend 5 hours on me trying to nail the perfect solo. Or like in practice, I'm very picky about tone. I want my tone to sound good. I also want my other guitar player's tone to sound good. And it got to where I finally told him, and he's an ESTP, so like I don't want to like piss off his FE child because he's very direct initiating control. But I finally said, guitar is a mid-range instrument, and you got too much bass in your tone, and you're just drowning with the bass player. we can't hear you. You need a lot more crunch. So what he did is he took his TE critic and TI parent and he did research and he came back to me. He's like, you're very right about that. Guitar is a mid-range thing. So I'm going to redial my tone and add in a lot more high end because you're actually correct on what you're talking about. And then his tone sounded a lot crisper. And I was
Yeah.
thinking, thank God. And then, but I'm very picky to the point to where I'll tell somebody, well, you should play out of this amp and that cab because that will produce a good sound and it will sound better than the thing you're wanting to do. But I don't like to tell people what to do, but that goes through my head of, so is that what you're calling SE parent?
Yeah, most definitely. It's SE parent. You're being responsible with the experience given to somebody else. Hey, you need to do this, And so when I, everyone parents with a different function. And so what does the parent do? It's usually what you're bossing people around with. Either that or the critic function, but the critic function is usually more abrupt and negative in a way. And so so you have ESFPs all over Facebook, for instance, parenting people on morality, who's a good person, who's not, let me teach you about this, and so you're like, well, why are these people all involved in sharing journalism all day long? Because they're wanting to parent with that function, and their child functions teaching and teaching and teaching and teaching. So you can call it sharing fake news, which I do, and right or left for that matter. And so that's just what I get, when I hear like TE child and FI parent from the ENFPs or ESFPs in that sense. And so with me, for instance, TI parent, when I'm at the philosophy meetings, when people start spouting off a bunch of emotional crap, I usually always say, no, you need to think this through. You're being irresponsible with the way you're thinking because this is true, this is true, this is true, this is true, which negates everything you just said because that's really just based on your emotions. And it gets me in trouble because there are a lot of high FI users at the philosophy meetings. And that can be triggering to me sometimes because although I do respect it, because I like to listen to these different perspectives and all different things. And I find humans bizarre, yet fascinating, if that makes any sense to me. And so I don't necessarily pick favorites in that sense. And that's just kind of how it is, devil's advocate. And so, when it came to music, I just didn't want to have that. And I brought up bands like Rage Against the Machine and their albums. And you just said, we don't use any synthesizers. Zach doesn't use any voice modifiers, because everyone always wanted to know how they made those sounds. They're using soldering irons and drills, and all this original stuff. And to me, it sounds ISFP. And so I'm reaching to the point now where I can put on the radio and listen to music and hear the way the musical system is. And I'm like, okay, this artist is control, or this artist is movement. And you can kind of tell, I was in the post-hardcore movement of the early 2000s, where bands like Thursday were really, really popular. I love Thursday's music. And I always had a connection to the way they produced it, and it was chaotic and all over the place. Turns out Jeff Rickley is an ESFJ, and so there you go. And so why was that? Because movement types are like, no, this is boring. But low control types would be like, no, we have to have a bridge here. You have to have the chorus here, and the verse has to be here. Otherwise, it won't be the sound I'm looking for. And is this making any sense?
I used to write a very ABC structure. Then I started jamming with people that told me that my writing was boring. So now I'm writing with an ISTP, and it's a mixture of control and movement in the song structures. I'll come up with the riff, but he will kind of help me arrange it. But his arrangements are interesting. But I told him this, well, let's keep everything the same tempo. We will not slow down unless it's halftime. I want people to be able to bob their head to this stuff. I don't want it being all over the place. Like, I like progressive, but let's make it where people can latch onto it, because if it goes from one tempo to the next and from one time signature to the next, that crap's hard to follow, but I've written with people that write stuff like this. So like in my earlier years, I used to write really boring ABC stuff. And then I jammed with, some movement people that we were writing, because we're writing as a team. It was stuff that was going a little bit crazy on the progressiveness. But as I've matured, and because this is what I prefer, I've always preferred just something with a straight tempo that you can follow. I don't like, all of a sudden this song has dropped pace and you can't follow it anymore. I like it to make sense. Not saying I haven't done progressive stuff myself, because it's all about who you're jamming with can also influence you. But
Yeah.
my natural writing style is very ABC and kind of, I wouldn't say boring, but people tell me that my riffs get kind of bland and that they sometimes need a little, add this here or add that there. So I guess you're right in your assumption.
Okay.
Not
Yeah. I don't know. This is all abstract. Thought process. And so when I listen to music, you can understand why certain symphonies, for instance, seem to be an INTP thing, where they're listening to all these abstract sounds and they're creating this controlled orchestra, and I don't see an ENTP doing that. ENTP's music is very chaotic and just like all over the place. And that's what I always emphasized when I was in music was, no, I don't want the verse, bridge, chorus sound at all, and so many of my songs released didn't have a chorus at all. There was no hook, and they're like, well, people aren't going to like that. Like you said, I didn't care.
right.
I'm pragmatic. And so it's just like, and it's just like ENTPs will do stuff without any material compensation in mind because they don't have any interest. It doesn't matter, and so sometimes you got to ring us in and say, hey, you got bills to pay, or things like that. And so you kind of like, oh, okay, I never even thought about that. And that's just what I thought was kind of funny to me. But now, yeah, I'm listening to music now at this point. I'm just like, seems control. And definitely, I'm with an ENTJ, and he definitely prefers controlled music as well. And so he always played these songs, and I was just like, but this is so they can anticipate everything that's going to happen in the song. He's like, I know, I like that. And I'm like, but why? Don't you want to be like hit over over the head with something you weren't expecting? Like, whoa, what was that drop? And I mean, I'm pretty old and out of the scene now, but that was like one of the cool things when like Norma Jean first came out, with some of their crazier drops and their chaotic music, and it kind of changed heavy metal in the early 2000s, with I don't know if you're familiar with Norma Jean, the first album,
I've heard
Bless
of
the
them.
Martyr and Kiss the Child.
I haven't listened to them, but I know who they are.
Yeah, I know we're in a different generation, so it's a little bit different and difficult with that. But like after that album release, but Josh Scogin left, and he's formed a band called The Chariot, which was my favorite metal band, and they were Christcore at that, so it's kind of funny. But yeah, when they released the song "Memphis Will Be Laid to Rest," it like changed everything because it was just like these crazy, drops, breakdowns, and to me, I watched it, change music, and I think of bands like Thursday that came out of New Jersey in the New York scene and that emo post-hardcore scene. Everyone was kind of trying to follow Thursday in that sense. But then bands like Taking Back Sunday came out, and they kind of got it more under control, more with hooks, more like that, because Adam LaRaza is probably an ISFP. I don't know for sure. And but keeping on music and different people from an ISFP perspective, guys like Dr. Dre, for instance, I'm pretty sure an ISFP, you would think, and he's the type of person that takes 10 years to release an album, and like, because he's so trying to figure out this kind of stuff. But for the most part, you can always trust on him releasing good gold music, and that's just the way that was for that. All right, anything else?
Not sure. You said we were from a different generation, but I think you're the same age as me, if not a year older.
Oh,
So,
really?
How old do you think I am?
Late 20s.
That's a compliment. No, I'm getting to mid-30s, man.
Oh, okay. So what were you into then?
I'm actually into old metal, though. That's the difference.
What do you mean by old metal, though?
anything from like Black Sabbath, Ozzy, Dio, Sabotage, Judas Priest, and I like a lot of
Okay,
European
we're going
stuff.
to
Like
the SP stuff now. That's all the tough guy rock is what I call that.
I also like Nightwish, Delane. These are the European bands with the female singers. Xandria, Epica. I like a lot of metal, man. I like a lot of melodic death metal, black metal, power metal, 80s metal, but the list could go on. It would take me forever to list all the bands, but I'm more old school in European nature. But it's cool that you thought I was younger, but I'm definitely getting close to mid-30s, man.
All right, all right. Yeah, I'll be 36 Saturday. Yeah, it'll be my first birthday. So the ENTJ is buying me a cake. So I've never done that before, and so it'd be interesting. That's funny to me. Okay, so you weren't into you weren't into the emo scene at all.
Nah,
Well, what did you view emo scene like?
I thought they were rather cheesy, and I'm like, that's not real metal.
So you didn't listen to Norma Jean, you didn't listen to Under Oath. Did you listen to Atreyu from Autumn the Ashes?
Nope. I'm aware of all that stuff though, because
August
everybody.
Burns Red. What are these other metal bands we used to be really into? The Chariot. I mean, this is all my generation. Did you get into Bring Me the Horizon?
I've heard them, but it's just not really my style. I'm
Interesting.
aware of these bands. Yeah, SC Parents aware of these things. I just never got into it. I'm more old generation metal.
Interesting. Now it's going to completely just change my whole perspective on what these guys are. I mean, these guys all to me all portray movement to me, and I think that's why I was going down that route. And so that definitely will bring into the equation. Yeah, but I consider like a lot of those old school metal bands you mentioned was kind of like that. The whole '80s was very SP to me. That whole culture was just all about let's be tough guys, you know, and let's go get some bitches and drink and party. And to me, that was just so empty, you know. And
it is empty for sure. I don't really do those kind of things.
and so that's how I always viewed that music. And my brother was really into that. And all of his friends were into that. And you know, and I've never really felt in place in that sense. And so that's kind of funny when you talk about music and stuff like that. And so that's just interesting to me. I almost want to just like think about this now. We got to continue the interview though. And so, all right. So we also talked about dating interactions, and you know, there's definitely some convoluted arguments in those kind of situations. You have the people, you know, adhering to the socionics, which is about the duality. So in that case, they would want you with an ENTJ, you know, and they want me with the ISFJ, which I also clearly say no. And but what has been your experience with ESFJs following the system?
I don't know if I've known any over the years. Wait, I take it back.
I thought you said you were dating an ESFJ.
No, I've never dated one, but my best friend is an ESFJ. I've dated an ESTP and then some girl that was, I think, an ISFJ. I really don't remember. It's been so long since I've seen her. Her type is kind of hard to remember, but she had that mama bear thing going on.
Yeah.
I think she was ISFJ. I'm not sure, but I've never dated an ESFJ before. I haven't really dated much because I guess I'm too shy and don't put myself out there a lot. But my best
that
friend,
matter. They'll find you.
That's true. I just need to go out more. I don't do that a whole lot. I'm mainly working on music or working my night job because I work night shifts, so I just don't exist to the world. But I've never actually dated an ESFJ, although that would be my golden pair. But my best friend, who's like a brother to me, is an ESFJ, and he can read me like a book. So I guess that's a thing. I don't know.
No, I look at the dynamic of the ISFPs I've known and the ESFJs. I was with an ESFJ for a long time, and I definitely see why that would work so well. You know, and it would definitely be like because the ESFJ, a lot of people don't realize it because they're so gregarious, and people are like, oh, well, look, they're too social for the ISF people. No, because they're double background.
Oh yeah,
And so just,
oh sorry.
yeah, you go ahead. I don't care.
I was gonna say he is totally like that. He's totally cool with hanging out with people, and he's totally cool with just being glued to Xbox by himself, and he's totally fine doing that.
Yeah. So ESFJs, I mean, especially when they get older, you know, they can become like gardeners, and they're just totally working on their own home. They don't even care what's going on in the rest of the world. But then when they're out, you know, they're all like, hey, you know, let's be FE hero, like, you know, and you definitely can always call them up and, hey, can you help me out, bro? And they'll be right there, you know, on your front step. And that's kind of the way ESFJs are to me. And like even my ESFJX, still the nicest guy ever. You know, it was just we're too alike. And so that was just like, no, you know, because we're both trying to do the exact same things in the relationship, and that just wasn't working. You know, so essentially if when you're following socionics, the abstract type is the person that's going to end up taking one of the roles really, really hard because they have, I'm going to say, a weaker personality in a way because of what society dictates already. And so whether you're pragmatic NT or pragmatic SP, society still influences you, you know, in a way things should be in a way. Even if you're the most pragmatic ENTJ, it does not matter. You're still influenced by your surroundings. And nobody is an island in that sense. And so when we're talking an ISFJ with an ENTP, the ENTP would be the leading dominant one in that relationship. You know, and so that person is going to look for the ENTP to be the NI user and lead. And so you're constantly in your shadow as an ENTP in that situation, and it's exhausting, you know, and it's just constantly like, hey, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? Like, why do you want me to choose this stuff for you? You know, when they can easily be with an SP that's saying, hey, I want to do this. Can you do this for me? And they're like, oh yeah, no problem. You know, and they have that NI leadership that they crave, you know, and you can't tell them to be that way because they're talking trickster and demon function, you know, and that's not going to happen. You know, and so that's just kind of how that is with me. But I don't know, most ISFPs I've spoken with, they seem like they say that ESFJs always find them. You know, and so it's just like, oh, here we are, and they're like, oh wow, Chucky wants to do music, and if I do this for him, it'll be easier for him. And then, you know, and it's like they just want to help. You know, they just want to help and they provide all this kind of stuff to make your life easier. And that's kind of how ESFJs are, you know. And then with FI hero, you know, with you, it's kind of like, well, I have these moral principles, and the ESFJ is just like, oh my God, those are so great, you know. And this is kind of how it is. But ISFJ, ISFP marriages are also very common. I've seen them quite a bit.
I can imagine. I think the issue is I hide too much, and I'm not very noticed most of the time, and that's why I haven't dated in years.
Yeah. How was it like in your early 20s with TE Inferior?
Very sensitive to criticism and hated being criticized. Still kind of similar, but I try to tough through it. But just you really don't like people criticizing you or making you the bad guy. You don't like being confronted or anything like that because in your mind you're not the bad guy.
Okay. Yeah, because typically speaking, I've always been told that FI hero for the most part walks through life believing that they're a good person, otherwise they can't function.
Unfortunately, that is true, even though realistically everybody makes mistakes and nobody's really a good person. But then again, that's another debate for another day. But yeah, that's the general thought process that we have. And I guess another thing about TE Inferior during my 20s is I've always been told that I've been very like caring too much about what people think about me, and that's something I need to break and like not do. So I've had to train myself over the years to not care about what people think, but even still, that's easier said than done.
Yeah. And so you can kind of make sense of this when you see like Hollywood or musicians in sense, because typically speaking, a musical career is 5, maybe 10 years. And so you're like hot shit for all this time and everyone loves you. And then all of a sudden you're nothing. and you see like they can't process that, and how can the status just be gone? And so you see like meltdowns, Britney Spears shaving her head, and things like that. And does that make a whole lot of sense?
Kind of. I don't know if I focused a lot on my status or in those kind of words, but like an example of this is for a while in my circle when I was a teenager, I was known as the guy that played really fast on guitar. And then we started hanging out with an ISTP who blew me away on guitar. And they're like, well, Charles sucks now. That guy's way better than him. And I was thinking, well, fuck you guys. Even though I didn't get worse, I played the same. But this ISTP, because they're robots, he blew me out of the water with his guitar playing. And I think he's a great player. But they're like, well, Charles sucks now. This guy's just so much better than him. And he's not that good anymore.
Yeah, I mean, how do you even distinguish good at guitar, anyways? Because there's so many different styles of it. In that sense.
He played faster and cleaner and a lot more technical.
Okay.
Because they were most likely SPs like me, they're like, oh, he's a god on guitar. He's great. Charles sucks now.
Yeah. I mean, I've definitely witnessed things like that. And my guitarist in my band, for instance, never had any lessons. He's an ISFP and self-taught. And he definitely was teased and made fun of by other SPs in the music scene for maybe having slip-ups here and there, or maybe not knowing how to process certain things, because a lot of them were also trained while being self-taught, because he was raised a Jehovah's Witness himself, and so he don't go to music lessons because it's worldly, and so that was the issue. But to me, he released more original sounds, and him and I worked really well together because we're both obviously movement and both very flexible, and so I could just like say, oh, stop, okay, can you do this there? And he's like, okay, no problem, and so I didn't really have to really argue with any kind of control function in that sense of, no, we have to do it this way. And I don't know. And so music's wonderful, but I don't agree with best band or best sound. That's like saying chocolate cake is the best cake. Like, because lime cake and vanilla cake, those aren't real cake. Only chocolate's the best. And so to me, it's just that there's so many different styles out there, and music's just so versatile in that sense about, what are you in the mood before? Even when I listened to when I was younger, I mean, the way you view it is kind of like whiny and fake and stuff like that. And I listened back to my own music when I wrote when I was 20. I think I sound like a little whiny bitch. It's just like, well, I was like, well, I'm complaining about stuff that aren't even real problems. And so music is just so relative. And now I'm like really into opera, musicals and Broadway. So I've definitely changed a lot. I mean, not that I don't like rock music anymore. It's just like not what I'm going to at this point in my life. And so that's just how it is on that. And so you work at a school, correct? And so you said you wanted to bring up some stuff on coronavirus because you were afraid to because it might be controversial. And I was like, well, if you want to say controversial stuff, this is the right channel. I don't care. So what's going on with the kids at your school?
They're on extended spring break at least for another 2 weeks. I don't know if we're going to shut down for the entire rest of the school year, but Dallas is, and Dallas is only 30 miles from me. So, the Mikey see, monkey do kind of thing that happens a lot. But it's kind of an interesting thing. I'm kind of glad to be on the extended vacation because I'm a custodial because they work us to death. At the same time, I do actually feel bad for the kids that don't really get to eat much because of this because they were depending on the school meals. And I do feel bad for the parents that have to try to, figure out where they're going to put their kids every day because I try not to be selfish because I am naturally very selfish by nature. But it's a mixed bag. I think everybody's freaking out too much, and the best thing to do is just use common sense. Wash your hands, and you'll be fine. Use your brain, use common sense. But people were making it into the apocalypse. And I don't know, it's a lot of weird stuff going on, and I get we got to be safe, but at the same time, I don't like our freedoms being attacked right now because, like, somebody was trying to tell me that we're supposedly in a couple of days not even going to be allowed to go to work, to the grocery store, or anything. You literally can't buy or go. And I don't believe that for a second, but I know there are things that are shutting down, like the bars and all that stuff. But they were trying to say, no, even the grocery stores are shutting down. You can't go to work. You can't leave your house. You can't go buy stuff.
Yeah.
My TE inferior is saying, well, show me this source and let's get this verified, because I don't believe that for a second.
Yeah, and I'm also a pessimistic thinker as well. And so I get what you're saying. And to me, it's just kind of like, oh, let's just suspend the Constitution over, something that only kills old people. And I know people are they're trying to cherry pick these other little situations of somebody 43 dying and things like that. And I think, to me as an ENTP, like I told you, I prepared for this 2 months ago. Granted, I have connections to China, and I made videos, on my own channel saying, hey, people should buy extra rice, buy beans, buy all this stuff that doesn't go bad. Because everyone eats it on a regular basis anyways. And so you're not going to lose any money on that sense. I mean, I did buy freeze-dried food in case something shit really hit the fan. But to me, I just, at this point in time for humanity, globalization is here, it's real, and everybody touches everybody. There's no hiding with it. And so so you can't just say, oh, China has a new disease, so we're okay over here because we're across the ocean. Well, no, you're not, because there's literally airplanes flying across the Pacific Ocean to China all day long. I don't want to sound xenophobic or whatever was that the proper term for it? But it's just kind of like, yeah, you would think, hey, Seattle has a big outbreak, San Francisco has an outbreak, and LA has a big outbreak. Oh, I wonder why. Because they have regular contact with China on a regular basis. I grew up in the Bay Area. There's tons of Chinese people. I'm still eating Chinese food. This is my favorite Chinese restaurant. They wrote down the name of it right here. I show my students. You guys can't see it.
I can kind of see it.
And so, there it is. I got nothing against Chinese people. But if you have regular contact, with China, when you have this kind of stuff, and you see, oh, well, why does it always seem to be there? Well, they got 4 billion people. What do you think is going to happen? And every city there, I mean, New York is our largest city, 8 million people? That's a small city in China. It's like someone talking about Amarillo in Texas, or something like that. It's nothing. It's not even, they don't even think about it. And I think Wuhan itself is like 14 million. Shanghai itself is 25 to 30 million. Beijing's 25 to 30 million. And this is just like a whole different mentality and world that we just can't comprehend. I kind of figured it out a little bit just because I'm interacting with Chinese kids all day long. But to me, no, I prepared for it 2 months ago. I had all this stuff going on. And NTs can be paranoid more or less. And people were talking about, well, where'd you get your toilet paper from? I'm with an ENTJ. ENTJ stock up on toiletries already. They always are, and so I know his toiletry, he's got 6 tubes of toothpaste, he's got all the shaving cream, he's got razors, he's got toilet paper, all this kind of stuff that SE Child has developed over his lifespan because he hates being without it. So what's the obvious solution? Always have a stockpile. And so I've dated tons of SE Childs, and ENFJs are no exception. They also have tons of toiletries for some reason. It's really bizarre to me, but especially the fact that we live so close to a grocery store. But we went to the grocery store and there's no toilet paper, and they have no idea when it's going to be back, but I'm okay with that. I actually ordered, I know this might be too grotesque for some people, but I ordered a shower bidet, by the way. So there's that, just in case things really go bad. And do you know what that is? It's like a hose. I don't know, so you can wash your house.
Yeah. Yeah, I've
So,
seen those.
so if things go that bad, you know, I got that option. And so that's just kind of how like anticipation of what may happen. And so that's great. And so you mentioned that certain children rely on, you know, I grew up, there was a time in my life when I got the free lunches at school growing up too. So I get that. Um, Although I'm not so sure if I would not have food at home though. That's not usually something people go without usually because food stamps are pretty,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like people usually have more than they need, typically speaking. So you see people selling food stamps, for instance, you know, in many communities. And so that's the way that is there. And
I th-
it's,
oh, sorry. I was gonna say I think they'll be okay. They just got to make adjustments.
well, yeah, and Americans are terrible at that.
That's also true.
You know, it's just a sign of decadence. You're not flexible at all. You know, the people are like, oh, we got to be more like China. Well, China deals with this all the time. You know, it's not that big of a deal for them to have some kind of outbreak. They're not used to having a constitution and walking around, for instance, you know, in this kind of situation when the government says jump, you do, you know, and they have laws and different things like that where it's completely confined and nobody questions it. I mean, I had this conversation with Helen, who I'm actually going to interview after you. We're going to talk coronavirus too. And and get some things clarified with her because she's from Shanghai. Although she'll be here in the United States next month, tomorrow, I believe, and so it'll spread in Michigan. No, I'm joking. But
Funny.
and so she actually had to leave Shanghai, go to Thailand for 2 weeks for the 14-day ban, and then she can fly to USA from Thailand. If that makes any sense with biology.
That's just America does what it does.
Yeah, so it's just like you know, people want to say, oh well, travel ban this or you didn't do this. I mean, there's nothing they could have done. I mean, this is just coming back down to self accountability. That's what I've always promoted myself. I lean libertarian, you know, and I don't want the government involved in my life, you know, and even during a pandemic, I'm not waiting for the CDC to save me. I don't care, you know. Uh, and so it's just like I saw the danger, processed the information, and prepared for it. You know, that's kind of how that is. And so, but with you, you're getting paid break, right? That's a big uproar.
Yeah, we are getting paid. It's because it's government.
Yeah.
But there's also a catch. If they call me in to go check on something in the building or to, although I have a supervisor that's supposed to do that, but if they wanted to, they could say, Charles, go make sure nobody's breaking in the building because you're on paid break technically. That's kind of the little loophole, the fine print, so to speak. But
Yeah. You're on
but
paid
yeah,
break to avoid coronavirus, but yet you can still leave the house to go check on the school and get coronavirus.
yeah, it, it's dumb, but I haven't been messaged or anything from the supervisor. So I don't think they're gonna bug me to go check on the building, but the guy who's supposed to be my new boss, they probably will because that's his position and whatnot.
Or they replaced the ISTJ?
Yeah, well, she went on FMLA or something, and the new guy is either ESTP or ISTP, and he's a lot cooler and a lot easier to get along with.
Okay. I always found that to be the case when I was dating the ENFJ, who was a hotel manager, and he's always wanting to know who would be the best superintendent for the hotel, you know, to take care of things. I was always like, you need an ISP of some sort. I mean, you can get ISTPs and ISFPs to do the same thing. You guys could do. If you don't know how to do it, you can figure it out. You know, and so it's just, and you're not going to worry about because you work with an ESFP who's more chatty, and so if you have like an ESFP superintendent, for instance, this is what advice I was giving him. It was like he's going to be talking to the hostess, you know, the front desk. He's going to be talking to the house cleaners. He's going to find ways to have conversations, you know, and not to totally bash. My father's an ESFP, and he's one of the hardest working men there are, but in circumstances where there's a chance to be social, ESFPs are going to find a way. Like dinosaurs in Jurassic Park, they'll find a way, and that's kind of how that is in that sense. But how has your interactions been with mostly as an ISFP in occupations?
How's my interaction been at work?
Yeah. Do
Like
people
jobs?
expect you to lead at all?
When I'm working with that ESFP, when the supervisor's gone, I naturally somehow take the lead because he kind of will want to know what I'm going to do, and I end up kind of supervising a little bit. I don't know if that's just because I'm control or what,
Yeah.
but one day I was like, we really need to go do the lawn because the yard looks bad, and we got to get this stuff mowed and weed eated. This is before I knew we were going to be shut down for 2 weeks, but I'm like, we need to go mow and weed eat, and because the kids come back next week, and I don't want to hear, that we didn't do shit on the yard. We need to go fix the yard. And, he's like, well, whatever you want, man. I'm like, well, let's go do the yard.
All right. Well, yeah, when you mentioned the school coming back, you don't know what's going to come back. I mean, China's been out of school for over 2 months now. Okay, if that can give you an idea. I'm not saying that's going to be the case. I made a video about this. I said coronavirus is going to expedite home education and homeschooling itself. Homeschooling is not a weird subject in America. Lots of people do it.
No.
And so, but in China, it is weird. Like a lot of the more, collective governments don't allow it at all. A lot of European countries don't even allow it at all because they want to make sure they control what education people get. And that's a whole different subject in that sense. And so, I don't think people should expect their kids to be back in school anytime soon. I would say at least 1 month, especially with, media fanning flames. And this is now becoming a political subject, because politicians apparently can cure coronavirus at this point. I didn't know that. I guess I'm finding this out.
Right.
And so I didn't know that people actually looked at their politicians to solve their medical issues, but I'm wrong on that sense. They do, and that's just interesting to me. Did you watch? You did. You commented on it. So you watched my ISFP video.
I did, yeah.
Okay, we'll critique it.
Critique it.
Was I wrong about anything?
I think you were mostly accurate, honestly. For the most part, I mean, I've never been in a situation where a girl accuses me of, like making a wrong move. I'm responsible enough to know not to do that kind of thing. But I could see why that would mess up a lot of ISPs in general because they're not really aware of what's going on with the intention of the other person. Now, I've been in situations, though, where I thought a girl liked me and they just wanted to be my friend. So that's kind of that kind of territory. But but my thoughts were, well, this girl calls me every day. She must really, really want to be with me. But it turns out I'm just, her venting buddy. And I'm like, damn it.
Yeah, it's definitely, I've had, ISP friends, in those circumstances. And it goes both ways. Then I've also had ISTP friends the girl was totally crushing on him. And he didn't know.
That's true too.
And like she was totally into him and he's just like, but I think the higher FI, ISFP is a little bit more intuitive of what's going on in that sense. I definitely think ISFPs tend to build their any trickster better than ISTPs for that matter, if I might throw that out there, just based on the emotional ability they have and be able to interconnect with people.
I think you're right about that because there was a girl. Well, you're right on both points. There was a girl that liked me a long time ago too, and it took me a minute to realize she liked me. But after piecing it together, I'm like, whoa, she's into me, and I totally missed all this.
Yeah, and now she's not, and it's kind of like, it sucks. And no, definitely you can see this when you're involved with church relationships, for instance, I was, as a Jehovah's Witness, you know, you were involved in people's lives a lot. You know, there was tons of ISFP witnesses and ISTP witnesses with their wives, typically an SFJ, you know, and the SFJ was mad at her husband or whatever like that, because to her, oh, why did you not stop her from flirting with you? You know, why are you doing this? And he didn't know any different. You know, and you're like, you're accusing me of something that I just wasn't reality. You know, so you have that kind of little conflict, which I find funny, because in my case, when it comes to silver and golden pair conflicts in my relationships, it's more or less over feelings, because the NTJs are retarded in one way and I'm retarded in another way. And so like they're mad because I don't have any personal values, and I'm mad because they don't understand other people's values. You know, and so it's just kind of like that's kind of where our conflicts are. But the intuitive side, we both kind of know what other people's intentions are, and we both kind of scan the futures in this kind of ways in a different way maybe, but we both can come to each other's conclusions and speak the same language when needed. But you know, when I'm with an ENTJ, for instance, I'm just like, I just gotta accept it just doesn't understand people. You know, it just does not. You know, and you can see this with Donald Trump, for instance. He just doesn't understand people. You know, and he's just completely stunted. Effie Demon just doesn't get it. You know, and some people were like expecting him to understand other people's feelings in certain instances, and he's so sensitive, and that's not really necessarily fair to ENTJs. For that matter, because you know they are very sensitive people, definitely inferior for that matter. It's just that they just don't get your sensitivities, or they think your sensitivities are stupid. And that's kind of how that is with that. And so, yeah, when I think of ISFPs, I generally they kind of, this is kind of a stereotype. They kind of get into jobs early in life, kind of below themselves, to go with something safe. But then by the time they're around 40, they start to get more into their own kind of leadership roles. And do you find yourself reaching that kind of like midlife crisis, ISFP, you know, or the ENTJ side of your mind is about to take over?
Kind of. I'm at a point where I realize I absolutely hate my job, but it's got security. But at the same time, my eventual goals are I want to get out of my job. I want to teach music or guitar. I want to become a better YouTuber where I'm actually, you know, having good material like teaching guitar and maybe a podcast. I want music to really be my career, and I want to get out of this working for the man thing because I'm just really sick of that kind of work. It's not creative and it's dull, it's boring, it's not me. But the SI critic says, but you be thankful for what you have. You have all these great benefits, and you have your job is government and everybody's off work, but you're still getting paid, which is true. That is a real benefit of my job is in spite of all the bull crap, I'm still being paid even though I am sitting on my ass.
Yeah.
Because of this virus. So that's the SI critic saying, well, you should still be loyal because you have health and blah, 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 which is true because I've been off most of this month because I got a hand injury. So I was off for a week, and then I worked for a day, and then spring break came up and I was off for like 40% of that week and only worked 3 days. Then I'm off another 2 weeks. So, I mean, I get it. But at the same time, I don't want to be there forever. I have goals and I have things I want to do, and I have a vision and I want to see that vision through. You know, I don't want to be just, you know, scrubbing toilets forever because I'm an artist. I'm a lot more creative than that.
Yeah.
Does that answer your
And
question?
no, it does. And it's interesting to me. And that's where, I mean, I definitely get that. And I see it all over the place, you know. And SI critic is to me, all of the introverted critic functions, because I'm not an introvert, I just don't know how you guys live with yourselves. And so it would be to me to be constantly critical about certain personal would drive me insane, you know. And so when you think about introverts versus introverts' fears are basically external, and extroverts' fears are internal. you know, and so I can somewhat relate with that because SI inferior definitely is a pessimistic SI. You know, and I definitely felt that I had this obligation, responsibility to be the best Jehovah's Witness in my family because my family was filled with a lot of fuck ups. And so that definitely kept me in for a long time because I didn't want to be like my brothers, you know, who left and made my mom upset, you know, and, you know, but eventually I just had to, you know, make my own way, you know, when TI parent starts kicking in around 30, you know, because your parent function kicks around 30, and so you're like, well, this isn't true, this isn't true, this isn't true, this is true. And so then you know, you make a decision. You know, you're gonna weigh the consequences. So that makes sense to me. And I get that when you're talking about loyalty and you're talking about duty and stuff like that. I see a lot of ISFP farmers that are probably in that same exact boat, but they don't want to let down their heritage.
Oh yeah. I
You
mean, that
know,
makes sense. I'm loyal like a dog, man.
yeah. And so that's just kind of how it is. But no, that's funny. Okay. Um, so we talked about interactions in that sense. You mentioned the teacher thing, which I find funny because ISFPs, I think, make really good teachers. Um, I've made numerous videos about INFPs being my favorite authors. Have you ever had a desire to be a writer?
I'm writing a book as we speak. Actually, it's going to be a 6-book series, but it's taking forever to do it. But I'm halfway done with the first book. I will be writing 6. It's probably going to take me till I'm like 50 to get the whole series out. But yes, it's a fantasy series.
That's so funny to me. Okay, yeah, and yeah, TE inferior loss writing, and I think that's great. And you know the band Coheed and Cambria?
I have heard of them actually.
Okay, so I think Marco is the lead singer's name, and I don't know if you know this, but Coheed and Cambria is based on a comic book.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Coheed and Cambria are both names of the characters in the story, and so all of their music is based on his comic book. I'm guessing he's an
Nice.
ISFP, so he wrote a comic book to go along with his music,
That would
or
make
he
sense.
wrote music to go along with his comic book, I should say, in that sense. And so a lot of people didn't know that. And so if you ever listen to their songs, like some of their most famous songs were like "Bye Bye Beautiful," "I Have to Run," or whatever like that. That song is literally about escaping a blowing up planet. You know, because it's a sci-fi comic book. It's like Robotech or I guess you could say Star Trek like that, but essentially Cohen and Cambria, I believe, are like doctor scientists being held hostage by Monstar to create some biological weapon or something like that. So,
That's
uh, and so, yeah, that's funny about the writing thing. So, yeah, that's good. All right. So, anything else you wanted to touch on?
I guess that's about it, man. I can't think of any other points at the moment.
All right.
But
So, all right. I have one more thing just for funny things because
that's
I know you left the CS Joseph Facebook group. Why did you do that?
fine. So I saw too many people getting kicked out of it, and I'm like, I just want to run before it gets crazy. But see, Joseph is still on my friends list. Actually, he's still on my Facebook friends list, although we've never spoken to each other once, other than on Discord and one time on Instagram.
That's funny. No, I'm still in the group. I didn't care, you know, and it has calmed down a bit. The people are different, and I don't really know a lot of them. I I find it frustrating because I built up a lot of credibility in the group. I thought so, and I know this is kind of like an FE contract where I thought I was valued in the community and people listened to me, and now I don't have that no more. And now like every post I do in the group, if you're like, what type are you? You know, it's just like, and like just 2 months ago everyone knew me, you know, and now I'm just like in a group, you know, and I did nothing, but also I'm still there, but I don't see a reason to leave. I don't care that much. But most of
Yeah,
my friends from the group are obviously in the new Union typology group, which is fine. Life goes on, shit happens, and that's just the way it is. All right, well, I'll stop it here. You know, you're always welcome to come on. You ever have any ideas, anything like that? bring it up, and we always interview. Peace out.
Cool, man. Appreciate it.